Hi gang, John O'Brien here, History 1530, looking for a place to happen. What's happening here for this YouTube segment of our course, we're going to try to do the first half of chapter 1 in 2 segments of about 20 minutes each, so get your coffee ready. Looking at the news today, current events, this is the final night of the Republican National Convention as a hurricane is moving inland through Louisiana, protests in Kenosha, Wisconsin, and other multiple crises, not just one crisis. So remember, our goal this semester is to connect past to present, so we need to know both. Okay, we need to know what's going on. So please keep up with the news, especially news regarding the upcoming national election for all members of the House, 1/3 of the members of the U.S. Senate, and of course the President of the United States. A couple things here, looking at Blackboard, more relevant perhaps. I do have the syllabus up, and I did find a way to kind of link, sorry, not the entire textbook, just the title of the textbook. I will be putting chapter 1 into Blackboard and chapter 2 as well soon. Sorry that's not in there yet. We're not able to scan that. I cannot put the entire book of 15 chapters in there. I think the folks at Oxford University Press would not like that very well. But we'll put in the first 2 chapters as a PDF as you get your textbooks. I do have some articles already posted for you. So in the announcement section, we have week 1, week 2, week 3, 4. Well, we're still in week 1. So please read the articles as I post them. They will comprise 1/5 of your first exam. 4 articles, somehow, not sure I'm going to do that yet, but combined together into 1 question out of 5 for your first exam. The first exam is, when you were wondering, about a month from now. That being, okay, final page of the syllabus here. First exam will be administered from September 14th through September 21st, but keep up with the reading. Get the darn textbook. 4 chapters is too much to try to read in 1 week, let alone overnight, and you can read these articles right now, or at least read the first one. And hopefully we can discuss this article on Monday from Monday's class. But difference between the Democratic National Convention, which was last week, and the Republican National Convention this week, in 1 tweet. You could maybe say in 1 word, hope versus fear. I'll let you figure out which is which there anyway. Not to betray my bias too much, but why not? I mean, you should know where I stand politically. So there we go. Always safer to deal with the past, isn't it? So I'm going to do this through a slideshow. Look, I'm going to go quickly in these YouTube videos because you can rewind them or slow them down if you need to. But chapter 1, Worlds in Motion. We're looking back to 1450 to 1550. Wow. Michael McGarr et al., our authors for our text, are rounding off, obviously. Okay, I'm not sure everything just started in 1450 and neatly ended in 1550, but we're looking at that century on the threshold of the modern era. Okay, when worlds were in motion. Here we have some images, also from your text, from the Aztec codex, as well as Aztec model of a home. So the Aztecs did not have writing in the sense that the Europeans were familiar with, but they had ways to record their really sophisticated culture. And not to get too far ahead of the game here, but the Aztec capital of Tenochtitlan, which is now kind of underneath Mexico City, housed between 200 and 250,000 people. That was 10 times bigger than anything in Europe at the same time, right? The Aztecs, building upon their ancestors, had a culture based upon agriculture, especially corn, beans as well, to give some amino acids. Very, very advanced mathematical systems, sports with a rubber ball. So a pretty advanced culture, but they did not have guns, they did not have steel swords, they did not have horses, and they did not have resistance to so-called old world diseases, okay, European diseases. Malinche, cultural translator, or big word is interloper. Really interesting biography of her in the front part of chapter 1. A woman, young woman, actually a girl enslaved by the Aztecs, then the Maya, so she's going to develop languages, and quite often captives become interlopers, kind of intermediaries between cultures because they became multilingual. Right? She's given to the Spaniards as a gift, and she learns to speak Spanish eventually, and she can translate for Cortez from Spanish to really Nahuatl, the Aztec language. She became an advisor to Cortez. Look, she had to survive. She's not well respected within Native American communities. I've learned firsthand of that. But on the other hand, she was a woman who had to survive, and her enemy was the Aztecs, or were the Aztecs, right? So why would she stick up for the Aztecs, right? She's going to do what's best for her and maybe her people. She ends up with Cortez, and actually has a child with Cortez, and her child grows up to be a Spanish nobleman back in Spain. So really interesting. But look at the role of gender in cultural interaction. Often women became the culture intermediaries, right, between two cultures. Melinche, or Doña Marina, as the Spanish call her, a good example of that. So worlds in motion, about the worlds of native peoples. Look, this hemisphere, the Western Hemisphere, was populated 3 great waves of migration during the last ice age. Circa, if you see C in front of a date, it means like, we're just guessing there. Circa, Latin for approximately 12,000 BCE. That's somewhat in dispute. Could be 15,000, could be 20,000, could be even earlier. But people crossing over from what is now Siberian Russia into what is now Alaska. Well, you can't do that today. It's water, still cold water. But 12,000, 15, 20,000 years ago was ice and a land bridge. Okay, the water was congealed in the polar caps so much so that the sea levels were very low, and you could kind of walk. Which way am I going here? You could kind of walk from Russia to Alaska. Maybe you get your feet wet a little bit. But as the world warmed, as we had global warming, over a very, very long period of time, those ice caps melted somewhat, and the sea levels rose, and the people who walked into Alaska could not walk home again. Not that they want to. This was a hunting and gathering society. Everyone around the world was hunting and gathering at this time. This was prior to the invention of agriculture. And they were following the animals they were hunting, okay, which were coming down kind of an ice-free corridor from Western Canada into what is now the United States and beyond, all the way to the tip of Tierra del Fuego by about even 10,000 years ago. Okay? So shifting climate's going to change lifestyles as those polar glaciers, polar caps and glaciers melted. More water was put into the atmosphere, so it rained more. We will see the growth of plants, and eventually, in different places at different times, I'm going to say the invention of agriculture. Right? Large mammals went extinct. So even prior to civilization, even prior to humans farming, large animals went extinct probably as a combination of overhunting as well as climate change. You might just think, woolly mammoths, not going to do too well in a warming world. Okay? So hunting and gathering was the characteristic lifestyle of humans from about 200,000 BCE, when we have the evolution of Homo sapiens sapien, until about 10,000 BCE. When I say BCE, I mean before the Common Era. It used to be called BC, which is more of a religious term. BCE means, look, if I'm saying, 2000 BCE, that's 4,000 years ago, okay? 2,000 years before our Common Era. Indian people began to farm in different places at different times. Probably the Olmecs in the Gulf of Mexico first domesticated corn. I'm going to say invented, but that's not really true. They didn't invent corn, but they domesticated it. So how do you do that? Well, you have to have a lot of discipline, especially as a hungry person. You, in a sense, kind of eat the small ears of corn, and you plant the big ones, and you do that again and again and again, and you nurture it. And finally, you start to, basically evolve, almost through genetic manipulation, larger, meatier, if you will, grains of corn, okay, or ears of corn. Which is not exactly what our book is. Yes, well, our book would say that, but our book is going to focus on the development of agriculture first in the world was in what we might mistakenly call the Middle East, okay, southern Iraq, okay, along the banks of the Euphrates and Tigris rivers. Some American societies will make this shift to full-time agriculture. It's a bit later, okay? I mean, in some ways, humans arrived in this half of the planet later. They're less numerous, and it's going to take longer to develop farming, especially because, and your book makes a good point on this, as historians learn more about nutrition, just eating corn, not going to do it, right? Please don't try this at home. Too many simple carbohydrates and sugars. You need the amino acids, the proteins really found in beans. So once those crops are grown together, and you might throw in squash, as North American native people did, you really have a symbiotic relationship, right? The corn stalk's going to grow tall, the bean, the vine wraps around it, the broadleaves of squash keep the ground somewhat moist and shaded. And also if you eat these things together, it's fully nutritious, okay? So once society's got the nutrition from beans and then other crops, they could step back from hunting and fishing most of the time. They could settle down. They could live on the crops they grew. And the few animals in this hemisphere that were domesticated, no cows, no sheep, no pigs, no horses, they were dogs, okay? There were dogs, llamas, bison, not domesticated, deer, for some reason, never, rabbits, those things not really domesticated. So the Native American people prior to 1492 will have just fewer animals to domesticate, thus fewer animals domesticated. Okay? So who's going to pull your plow? You. Okay, you don't have a horse or a mule to do that. All right. So selective breeding of corn, I guess again I said that. Corn and beans, oh, I just said that too, complete protein. And the consequence of sedentary lifestyle, well, you're not wandering around so much. Okay, you can start to build things, more permanent structures. I should also say, your book doesn't make this point, but the sedentary lifestyle was actually less healthy, although people live longer. How does that work? Well, the caloric value was there, but the nutritional value was not. So actually, in an evolutionary sense, eating a more gatherer and hunter diet, think very lean meats, fish, berries, mushrooms, root crops, nuts, these types of things, it's actually healthier for us than just eating like the starch of corn. Okay? So what will happen actually with this so-called Neolithic revolution that, again, takes place at different times around the planet. It starts first about 12,000 years ago in the Middle East, southern Mesopotamia. People actually get shorter and be more diseased. And because as people start to live with animals, they get diseases. And that's a bad thing in the short term, but maybe a good thing in the long run, right? Because people can build up immunities to disease or acquire immunity to disease over the course of their lifetime in a way that Native American people will not. So if you don't have pigs, you're not going to get swine flu. If there are no cows around, unless there's a human transmission, you're not going to get smallpox. Okay? No chickens, harder to get avian flu. So people in Africa, Europe, and Asia are going to be domesticating animals and living with them, and a poor diet are going to get sick. But those who didn't die could build up immunity, okay, in a way that native people can't. And this will be a real tragedy as we move through, well, time and also through the course, that when the Europeans arrived, they brought novel diseases. Go figure, right? Novel disease, something humans in this hemisphere had never encountered before. It was highly, highly virulent, things like smallpox, which will just devastate Native American populations, at least for the first generation. Of course, it doesn't, this is a bad term, but wipe people out. Okay, Native American people will survive and recover in time, population. They're not totally, obviously there's no total disappearance, but just tremendous tragedy, loss of culture and lives. Okay? It's really the worst Holocaust in human history. That said, it was nothing, look, the Europeans did a lot of bad things. Slavery, rape, massacres, but they did not launch any type of biological warfare. Okay? The Europeans did not intentionally cause a pandemic of smallpox. No one knew what caused smallpox 500 years ago. In fact, no one knew what caused smallpox even 150 years ago. In the 1870s when we first began to discover pathogens. Okay, so, in Mesoamerica, what do we mean by Mesoamerica? Middle America. I'm not sure what happened to my image, guys. Sorry. Oh, there it is. No, there it isn't. Maybe I missed one. Sorry. In Mesoamerica, so think between North and South America, we have the first technologically advanced civilizations. Skip by your book, I would say the Olmecs in the Gulf of Mexico, and then the Maya, okay, Mayan civilization. Brick city-states, often at war with one another, actually. They actually work to destroy their local climate by cutting down all these trees and burning them up to make the bricks. That's another story. The city of Teotihuacan in a lake district. Lakes are now gone in central Mexico, both of which will be kind of predecessors to the Aztecs, who are still extant, still around when the Spanish show up, when the Europeans show up in the 1520s in Mexico. corn agriculture will slowly travel northward. This idea of corn, and you can plant it, and you don't have to hunt and gather all the time, right? You can maybe be part-time hunters, but you have a settlement. We'll move northward slowly, first to the southwest, and then kind of up the Mississippi River, and there'll be a largely unified culture of corn and beans, languages that are mutually intelligible, in even architecture. They will borrow from the Maya and then the Aztec and even the people of Teotihuacan, kind of step-shaped pyramids. Now, in the Mississippi area, Cahokia was built not out of hard bricks, but out of packed earth, which means over time it's going to erode and become kind of mounds. Distinct cultures will develop in the eastern woodlands. That's where I'm kind of standing, so to speak, in like the northeast. But also corn, beans, and squash. Actually, the Seneca, who inhabited the place where I'm standing now, called Joligoa, right? Corn, beans, and squash, three sisters farming. Great Plains, Pacific Northwest. Native people had to adapt to their environment. Okay? But remember, Great Plains, before 1492, and in fact, until well before the mid-1500s, no horses. So the Europeans brought them. And the Europeans had kind of stolen them from people in Southwest Asia anyway. Pacific Northwest was a highly diversified economy, largely salmon fishing, which was apparently rather easy because people became kind of quite wealthy in places like Washington State and Oregon. What's going on in Europe at the same time? Well, in Spain, there's a long process called the Reconquista. The beginning dates of the Reconquest, it's a Spanish word, are somewhat in controversy. Some say it was 500 years, some say it was 700 years. Your book is saying it's like 3 centuries. Basically what happened was Islam arose in the 7th century, that's the 600s, coming out of Arabia, pushing across North Africa, crossing the Isthmus, and into Spain. Excuse me, not Isthmus. I don't mean Isthmus. I mean the Straits of Gibraltar. Isthmus is something else. Sorry. I can't pause and go back again, so just edit that, right? Crossing from North Africa into Spain. And for much of the Middle Ages, from like the 700s until about 1492, at least parts of Spain were ruled by Muslims. Does that mean everyone in Spain was Muslim? No, right? The Moors, or the Muslims, ruled rather tolerantly over other Muslims, but also Christians would have been only Catholic. That was the only choice in Western Europe at the time, and Jews. But over time, monarchs, rulers, local rulers in the north, allying and marrying and working together, drove the non-Catholics ever southward. And that process, called the Reconquista, concludes in 1492. Okay? Ferdinand and Isabella, King and Queen of Spain, complete that process and kind of push off the last Moorish ruler from Granada across the Mediterranean. How auspiciously that date was, because Columbus shows up and says, hey, I'm back. And they had rejected him before, but I'm back, and his idea was to venture westward to reach the east, the markets of Asia, China. Okay? So this was a holy struggle declared by the Catholics, who tended to be rather fanatical at the time, especially Isabella, kind of a holy war Christian at the time. Forced out Muslims and Jews. Convert or die. Okay, I converted. Well, then you have to prove it through a whole kind of court system called the Inquisition. Burn you at the stake to see if you have actually converted or gone back to your old ways. Right? So world trade. Before 1492, look, European population's on the rise. Why had it been low? Well, there was something called the Black Death in the 1340s and even 50s. Population of Europe had sunk in the mid-1300s. Now it's rising by the mid-1400s. And there's a class of very wealthy people. What do wealthy people want? Rare stuff. Stuff that other wealthy people don't have. Spices, silk, servants who are of a different skin tone than your servants. Okay, slaves who come from far away, because weirdly, perversely thinking about this, they cost more. Okay, so it's all about status. And the spice markets are here. It's not just to show off your neighbors. It's also